if one of your kids wanted to write a book, what would you say to them? You would say,
Mhm.
go get a notebook, go open a computer, like start typing, start doing it. You can do it. And you'll be their biggest cheerleader. So sometimes you have to be your own biggest cheerleader and just say, this is something that I want to do.
So often, women find themselves juggling a dream and a family, or a career and another dream, and it's so hard to do that. Today, my guest is going to talk about her journey of juggling motherhood, homeschooling, and publishing 25 novels. She's going to share her experience, her tips, and just we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it. I'm excited about this because I think it's an important conversation for us to have. I know so many women out there who want to publish a book, who desire and have these dreams of theirs, and they're just trying to figure out how to make it all work while being faithful to the family that God's given them, while also the dream that He's given them. So I'm so excited for Hannah Jo Abbott to be joining me today. Hannah, thank you for taking your time out to talk about your journey of being a mother and a writer.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Hannah, you are a Christian romance novelist and you are an indie author, right? You have
Yes.
published all these books yourself, which is another feat in and of itself. Like, I just the fact that you are a mom and homeschooling and a published author is a big thing. But the fact that you've taken this on as an indie author as well. And for those of you who don't know, being an indie author means you like the lovely thing is you do get to have control, but the fact is that you have to then make all the decisions and be responsible for everything. So it's a lot that can be on your plate. And so I'm excited to hear how you kind of got into all this, the things you've learned along the way, and maybe some tips you have for those of us who find ourselves in a similar position.
Sure. Yeah.
So before we get into things, can you just kind of give us some background on yourself? I know you're a USA Today best-selling author. Did I say that correctly?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So I'm really curious, like, how did you end up in that position? Like, how did you end up becoming a best-selling author?
Well, okay, so there's a number of things that go into that. So for USA Today, I actually was in a box set that was on the USA Today bestseller list. So to do that was really sort of a conglomeration of, lots of different things that I have done, people I have met. And so just being able to make those connections and build friendships and then be invited to be a part of a project that grew into that.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about how you even got to the point where you're a published author
Yeah. Okay.
and
So
with
I
25
have wanted,
novels.
yeah. So I have wanted to be a writer my whole life. I remember when I was about 10 years old, I went to a friend's house one day and she had written a book for a children's writing contest. And I saw it and the only way I can describe it is like the idea of writing a story just took hold of me. And I remember spending the rest of the day being like, she wanted to go and play and do other things. And I was like, I want to write a story. I want to write a story. Like, how can we write a book? Like, I want to do that.
Mhm.
And to be honest, like I have felt that way ever since. Like I love stories. There's always stories going on in my head. So I'm always thinking about like, how can I write this story? How can I, do that? So, but I wrote, here and there all of my life really. I published my first book in 2017, so about 7 years ago. And when I did that, I really had no idea what I was doing. So I knew I wanted to be a writer. I knew I had written this story that had taken me a long time to write, but I didn't know how to market. I didn't know how to do really any of the things that I needed to do for that. So I kind of put it out, and then I didn't do anything else with it for a long time. And so a few years later, it's actually about 3 years later, I wrote the next book in the same series. And at that time, the Lord was super gracious to me and allowed me to meet some other indie authors who were writing Christian romance like me. And so we kind of started, talking about all of the things that we needed to do. And so that's when I really started learning all of those pieces that go along with indie publishing. And so, anyway, after that is when I really started writing consistently. And so in 2019, I published my second book, and then I've just kept going ever since then.
So you've published 24 books in the last 5 years? That
Yes.
Oh my word.
Yes,
Oh,
I sure have.
So
So
how in the world, because you have littles at home, right?
I do. I'm a mom of 5 kids. So and we homeschool, and so my oldest is 12, and then my youngest is actually 5 months. Um, and so it's funny, I always tell people that, I actually there was a period of time, like, right after I graduated from college where I was living at home, and I really didn't have a whole lot to do. I wasn't dating anybody, I wasn't married yet, I didn't have kids, and I had, like, quote, unquote, "free time," and I didn't write books. I could
Yeah.
have, I had all this time, and now I have, like, really no extra time, but when it's something that you want to do, when it's something that the Lord has called you to do, which I really truly believe He has for me, then you find a way to make it happen, and so
Mhm.
it's part of our life now.
Mm. So can you kind of share what that looks like? What does your life look like? How do you navigate how many books you're putting out this each year? Like, 'cause that's a lot. Like you have to have time to both write that, but then you also have to do the publishing side of it. So how are you navigating all of that with also having littles at home and homeschooling?
Okay, so when I first started, like seriously publishing, my kids took naps, and so that was a little bit easier. Actually, I remember at one time sort of lamenting to some of my writing friends, like, how was I doing that? Where I was seriously consistently, I used to consistently write 2,000 words a day, and I was like, how did I do that? And they were like, your kids napped, remember? And I was like, oh yeah, they don't do that anymore. So
Yeah.
it's there's different phases of life, there's different seasons, and so you have to figure out what works for your season. So at that time it was naps. Now, other than my 5-month old, my kids are, they can go and play on their own. I don't have to watch them every second of every day. um, and so for me, writing in this season of my life looks like just writing in little snippets of time. I love to write in 12-minute sprints. I will set my phone because 12 minutes seems like, nothing major is going to happen in 12 minutes. Um, and it's not like so long that I can't get back to, whatever. So I will set my timer on my phone and I will write for 12 minutes. And that may be the only writing I get all day,
Mm,
but 12 minutes at a time is moving me closer and closer to, having a book written.
yeah. Do you have specific times of day where you, like, obviously you're talking about like 12-minute of writing, but like other things that, um, so do you do like your design of your book cover or layout or do you do any of the other part of the publication process yourself or do you hire that all out?
Yes, some of both. I don't design any covers. I am not a designer. I have no like. I always laugh when I'll say I don't have any artistic ability, and people are like, "Well, you write books." I'm like, "Yes, but like I don't have any artistic ability in like that." So I hire a cover designer. I do format my books myself. I have a software for that, but I do that. I have an editor who works for me. I have an assistant now who, which I didn't at the beginning. So I always when people are starting out and they hear somebody say, "Well, I have an assistant," but I did not for a long time. So,
Mhm.
but she does like, she just puts together my newsletter and does some graphics and all that kind of stuff. So she's super helpful in that area. But when I started out, yeah, no, it was all me. I did actually design my first book cover, which I should never have done. So yeah, but for the first and second book, I literally was doing all of it myself. So I've grown to be able to hire out those other things, which is really really helpful.
So then how do you navigate finding times for those types of, kind of like the behind the scenes logistical admin type of work that's not the
Yeah,
writing sprints?
yeah. So I try. Well, in this season, I'll be super honest with you, and is that I haven't been doing a lot of that. Like I said, I have a 5-month old, so since he's been born, like my writing has been slower than it was before, and so I'm kind of in a slower season of that. But my assistant does help with some of my marketing stuff, so I have passed off some of that to her. Um, but I try to give myself a writing, like, I wanna do at least 1 writing sprint a day, and then I try to give myself an admin task to do every day too. So if that's, like, starting a new ad or writing for my newsletter or, finding I don't know, like I said, I don't do my covers, but, like, finding an image for a cover, like, if I can break it down into little chunks. So if I do it like a writing task and a businessy admin kind of task each day, then that helps.
So do you plan out what books you're going to release in the year? Do you have like a production schedule that you hold yourself to? How do you kind of approach that side of things?
Yeah, so I have done that in the past. It's so funny that I'm answering all these questions, and then I'm like, "Except this year, I'm not doing that this year." Because I intentionally this year planned to have a lighter year. I don't have any pre-orders set up this year, because have had a newborn, and so, like,
Right.
I'm just trying to this year is like a lighter year for me, but in the past, yes, I try to, know which books I'm gonna write, it especially with having a cover designer and an editor, it's helpful for them if I can say like, okay, I'm going to need a book edited, around this time. I do like to have my pre-orders set up, and that's kind of how I set my schedule is by setting up pre-orders. They also give me a deadline, and I work really well on a deadline. So if I know it's coming up, I'm going to have to get it done. So
Right.
that's kind of been in the past. Yes, like I have done that this year. That's not happening, but I do try to set up like I want to accomplish these books this year. And then I kind of know like, well, that one needs to happen sometime between, January and February and that one between, these months or whatever.
So do you have a plan to pick things back up next year? Like, were you just giving yourself a little bit of break this year because you knew you were going to have a little one at home, or were you like coming off of all those books and are like, I just need a break, just period?
No, yeah, no, it was actually if you had asked me last year, I would have been like, "Oh no, like I'm going to write so many books last year and so many books this next year." It's yeah, because I have a baby, and also this was my first year that I was homeschooling all four kids. My
Mm,
youngest, other than my baby, is in kindergarten this year, so this was the first year everybody was having schoolwork to do and stuff. So I decided last year intentionally that this would be a lighter year. I'm hoping that it will be back to maybe more, at least more production than this year. Maybe not full production like it was in the past years, but we'll see. Yeah, every year I kind of have to decide what it's going to be. So
so how do you like plan quarterly? Like, do you plan like full year, or do you do it by quarters, half a year? Kind of how are you like when you said you made that decision last year? Was that at the like the end of last year? Just trying to get an idea of like how do you navigate the making plans, making decisions, but also being flexible as seasons come up and
yeah,
situations
I
change.
I think flexibility is the key there. And just, it just depends on, if I was, as far as somebody else who's wanting to do this, it, you have to take into account your own situation, what your own family is like, and those kinds of things. And then I do try to plan for a year, like how many books I will write. But that, yeah, we have to kind of reassess, about once a quarter. I do try to have like in in my mind, like, this quarter look back and see what I can do the next quarter. So, but yes, it's about making an overall plan and then just kind of checking in with myself and my family and seeing, what our needs are and whether I can continue at the speed I am or, back off or whether I can, do more. So being flexible is key though. There are, as a mom, there's always going to be unexpected things that come up and you can't plan for unexpected things. So, so yeah, being flexible is just very important.
So you said you had a 12-year-old, that's your oldest. And so is that 12-year-old like 7th grade or 6th grade?
So, yeah, she's in sixth grade.
She's in 6th grade. Okay, so you have a 12-year-old who is in 6th grade, right?
Yes.
And so you are doing like elementary, but next year you will be doing more of middle school. So
Yes. Mhm.
how do you navigate like having multiple kids, but then also these writing sprints and this like admin time? Do you have like blocks of time set aside for you to do work, or is it you're working it in, massaging it in throughout the day? Kind of how does that work for you?
Okay, so with homeschooling, I really try to have a block of time that we do school, and that I'm committed to that, and that I'm not doing anything else. I have in the past been a little tempted to like grab my phone and try to write or something, but that never goes well. So I have really
Mhm.
learned that single-minded focus for a short period of time is great. So in the mornings, once we start school, like I'm doing school and I stick with them until we're done. But really, we're done with schoolwork by by lunchtime, maybe like a little bit after lunch, or I might have, one of the kids might have an assignment that they go do on their own. But yeah, I really try to just keep it kind of separated. My favorite thing to do is to get writing time in the morning before my kids are up. If I do that, I just feel like my brain is fresh, and I
Mhm.
can make sure that it gets done and I'm not like dragging or dreading it later in the day. So if I can do that, then that's great. If not, then my second favorite time to do it is right in that kind of right after lunch, early afternoon. Always kind of feel like that's a second, start of the day. Like,
Mhm.
the morning starts off the morning, and then that right after lunch starts off the afternoon. So if I can get it in one of those two times, then it's great. That's very helpful. So, but yeah, I do try to block it off and have separate times.
Yeah, I had tried to do the writing in the morning before the kids get up, but my kids get up at like 6:30 in the morning, and I just cannot manage to do,
Yes.
get I'm like, by the time I get up, do my morning time, like prayer time and stuff like that, it's like 6 o'clock, and then they come out. And which I guess if I approached it like you did with like just a short sprint, I probably could accomplish something. I think that's something I don't do well with is taking advantage of those short little moments, like, right?
Yes.
Like I keep
Hmm.
wanting I want the ideal like 4-hour chunk, it's just not a reality when we
Yes.
have littles at home because I have 12. I'm only trying to think how old they are. 10 and 7 at home, and I homeschool as well. And so
Okay.
it's just trying to navigate the demands of the school, but then also all the little things you do as a writer. But I think for me, I definitely could do better about, like, just being okay with the short amount of time to just write some words and get them down and not be so, insistent on having, like, a chunk of time to work.
Right. Well, and for me, I always say that, like, I used to have a goal of how many words I would try to get in the morning, and I would almost never hit that goal because, like you said, like, my kids get up early too, and somebody's always coming down and interrupting or whatever. But
Yeah.
for me, if I write first thing in the morning, I just feel like it tells my brain, "Hey, we're writing today." And it kind of switches on that switch of thinking
Mm,
about my story, and so then my characters they're in my brain. And so I really kind of think about it the rest of the day after that. And then I do usually try to get back and write some more later. But if I tell my brain first thing in the morning, we're
yeah.
writing, even if I write, a short, I don't even if I write a couple sentences, sometimes it just gets me in that mode of thinking about my story.
So do you ever find yourself, like, conflicted? Like, you've started writing and you don't wanna stop, but now you have to stop and go homeschool the kids or stop and go feed the children. Do you ever find that
Yes.
happening to you? Do you feel
Yes, all
bad?
the
Because
time.
I feel bad.
Um, I I I mean, it's always gonna be something. And
Mhm.
so thankfully my kids are, because they're, starting to get a little older now, and they've seen me writing for, several years now. And they are able to see my, books on the shelf. They have seen when when I got USA Today, like that was a big celebration for us. And so they can see the things that have come from it. It's not just me like, sitting on at my computer that they can't like sort of understand what I'm
Yeah.
doing. So like if I am really, need to keep finish writing a scene, I'll be like, hey guys, I mommy's writing, I need to finish this. And because they do love that I'm a writer, and they're very proud of me, which I just love so much. So they they are able to kind of, give me a minute sometimes. But
Mm.
yeah, it's always going to be something. So
Do you ever work on, like, the weekends? Do you ever go and work, like, on a Saturday morning?
yes, if I am writing on the weekends, it's really because I'm up against a deadline or because I'm just behind and really need to do it. And I haven't done that in a while. Weekend time is family time, and I love that. And so I try not to write on the weekends, but I will. Or if we're going somewhere and I'm in the car, I'm famous for writing on my phone. So like I might, hey, I just want to write this, one little thing
Mhm.
down. I might do that, but I don't. It's not very often that I do that.
Okay. Did you have any kind of conversations with your husband about what this would look like? And did you find, if so, I see you shaking your head. So I'm seeing that, yes, that probably would have happened. Was there anything in particular that was helpful with in that conversation that you would suggest that others have that might find themselves, maybe they're newer to this and they're trying to navigate and they want to make time and space for it, but they need to have a conversation with their spouse to talk through what that might look like. How did that conversation go with your husband? And is there any words of advice that you might have for somebody who's new to this situation?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I've always wanted to be a writer. And so, like, when my husband and I met, he knew that I wanted to write. Again, it was several years before I actually like did it, but we have many conversations about my writing and, what that looks like and how he can help and those kinds of things. I am very grateful. My husband is very supportive of my writing. Um, but in the beginning, it was more like, I just would write at nap time or I just, would try to write and I would try really hard not to let it affect, our family life and, what I needed to do at home because it was just, my little hobby. And so now things are different because I do make an income from writing. It's a business, and so the conversations we have now are very different than what we had back then. Back then it was kind of like, oh, I'd like to write if there's some time. And then, as we kind of got into it, it would be like, hey, like I got to write tonight. He'd be coming home and I'd be like, I have to write tonight. I need you to do and then he would like maybe do bedtime or, do the dishes or whatever, just to give me a little bit of time. And then it kind of developed into, I did have a season where I would be like, I got to go to the coffee shop because I can't focus here. I need you to hold down the fort so I can go and write. And he would do that. He has given me the opportunity to go on writing retreats more than once, or just to have a writing retreat of my own where I have a weekend that's dedicated. So he is very supportive and very helpful. But like I said, that conversation has evolved as my business and my need for how much writing I need to do. So, but I would definitely say to someone who's needing help or support from a spouse, um, or a family member, then yeah, have those conversations. And just when it starts out, it might just be like, hey, this is something I'd really like to do, And so if that's like your hobby time, it's fine to have a hobby. Even as a busy mom, it's fine to have a hobby. So, make that your hobby time and decide what that looks like for you. Like, do you need an hour every week? And then there might be other times where you need bigger chunks of time that you can, start to ask for more if that's, you want to try to finish a book in a shorter period of time or something like that. So yeah, just I would just say the biggest thing is just to have the conversation. If you just, open that up and start talking about it, and make it, something that's important to you and they can see that too.
So, for the mom who wants to be a writer, or she has this book inside of her and she has the littles at home, or maybe not even like littles, but just she has this responsibility of children. Maybe she's homeschooling, but she's struggling with the guilt, feeling like
Mhm,
she's
mhm,
taking time away from her family, feeling like
mhm.
maybe she's pulling resources away from her family to do something for herself. What would you say to that mom?
I would say I have been there. I understand. And don't we do that as moms? Like we will give and we will, be there for everybody else. And then when it comes to something we want to do, we will push it to the side and let it kind of, go. So I would say, I see you. I get it. But think about, if one of your kids had this interest and they wanted to write a book, what would you say to them? You would say, go do it. You would say,
Mhm,
go get a notebook, go open a computer, like start typing, start doing it. You can do it. And you'll be their biggest cheerleader. So sometimes you have to be your own biggest cheerleader and just say, this is something that I want to do. And when like, this is the other thing I would say is that your kids need to see you do that. Your
mm,
children need to see you do something that you're passionate about that, maybe the Lord has gifted you to share that. And maybe it's a fiction story that He's given you, or maybe it's a nonfiction encouragement that other people need to hear. And
mhm,
so not only do you need to do it, but your children need to see you doing that thing that you are excited about and passionate about and writing the book that God has given you. So
mm.
I know that it's hard, but that is you have to start, and you have to kind of push the guilt to the back of your brain, and like I said, let your kids see you doing that thing because that's going to help them too.
Hmm, that's so good. Do you have any like practical tips for navigating everything? Um, I say everything. It sounds like so drastic, like so dramatic. Like we have so much, but sometimes it can feel like that, right? Like it's like I have this
Yeah, no,
laundry list of things
absolutely.
to do, but I have this thing over here that I really want to do. Do you have any like
Mhm.
practical tips of things that maybe have worked for you in the past? Things that maybe somebody might who's new to the situation, or maybe somebody who's like just trying to figure it out might not have thought of, and that you just
Sure.
know you can share?
Yeah, my number one thing that I always say is just start. Like, you have to just start, and,
Yeah.
I think I said earlier, but, like, I had lots of time when I was younger and didn't have the kids and didn't have a family, and I could have done it, but I didn't, and so
Mhm.
I think it's kind of it might sound a little harsh, but we have time for the things that we want to do, or we make time for the things that we want to do.
Yeah.
That might mean that we give up some things in some other areas. Like, there are
Yeah.
times when, like, I can't watch a TV show, or I can't
Yeah.
read a book that I want to read. Instead, I have to go write a book. So, we make choices. And I have to tell myself social media, I have to stay off social media more often than not. But um so that would be one thing, is, we just have to make a choice that that's what we're going to do. Practically, I would say um, that teaching our kids to be more independent is very helpful. My kids have learned to put away their own laundry. Now, of course, they're getting a little older and they can do their own laundry, which is amazing. um, you know, they learn to, like, empty the dishwasher. And so,
Mhm.
and those are just things that we do as a family anyway. Like, everybody needs to learn to help take care of the house. And so, but when you can teach your kids to be more independent, especially if you have little kids, like, teaching them to, okay, like, now is quiet time, even if they don't nap, like, and you're going to play quietly in your room, or you're going to look at a book for this time. And then you make that your writing time. So,
Mhm.
kind of matching up those things. I have written many a book while my kids played on a playground, and I sat on a bench and, "Mommy, watch me. Hi, I see you. You're doing great." And I go back to writing. So yeah, those would be some things. You just have to start, and there's never going to be a perfect time or a right time. I was definitely guilty of, like, waiting and hoping that one day I could sit at a beautiful desk with my computer and, like, have all the quiet moments. And I write books on my cell phone,
Yeah.
typing with my thumbs more often than not. So, just finding a way to make it happen, is just key.
Was there a point in your, journey where, like, is there a point that you can kinda look back at and say, "This was the moment where it kinda shift from being just a hobby to being a business for you?"
Yes, it was when I really started, like, consistently publishing and writing, and, like I said, I think that was in 2019. And there were a couple of things that happened that year. I really, like I said, I really just learned more about the business of how to market, and how to write to market, and I learned about, you know, tropes and outlines
Mm.
and things like that. It's also when I really found what I call my writing tribe, my friends who are writers, and we talk about writing all the time, and we talk about, how we can grow our businesses and how we can write better and all of those things. And so that for me was really key. When I
Mhm.
had friends who were writing and talking about writing, we were encouraging each other and challenging each other and keeping each other accountable and all of those
Mm.
things. So finding a writing community, I would probably say, is the number one reason that I really started writing consistently and writing as a business. And it's the number one reason that I'm still writing.
Yeah. Writing community it changes everything when you have
Yeah.
people who get it and who can speak life into it. So, um,
Yes.
I know I have found value from having writer friends keeping me accountable to things. So,
Yes.
you mentioned like the marketing stuff, and I noticed that now I might not have come across a social platform that you have that's a little bit bigger, but I looked at your Instagram and I saw your Facebook group, and your platforms are kind of on the smaller side.
Mhm.
by industry standards. I mean, if you got that many people in a room, it'd be a very crowded room. But but from an industry standard, it's kind of a smaller platform, which was actually really encouraging for me to see because you hear so much out there about you need big platforms to sell lots of books. But it sounds like you are doing really well for yourself. It is a business that's bringing in some income, and you're doing it without having to like build a huge social media following. So how have you kind of accomplished that? Because I think that leads into a conversation that I've heard a lot, or concerns that I've heard from women who are juggling people, kids at home and trying to write, is that they're like, I just don't have time for all the social media stuff I have to do, all the
Yeah.
posting, all of this, or it's taking away from my writing time. And so I'm just wondering from that side of things, how have you, what has been your experience with all of that?
Yeah. So I love social media. I love Instagram. I love Facebook groups and all of that. And so I do want to grow there, and I think that that is a great platform for a lot of, for writers to be able to grow and market. So I don't want to at all be like, oh, don't do it. However, yeah, like as a busy mom, it has just been hard over the last few years to really consistently spend time there. And so when I started growing, I really grew from a lot of book promos. I'd have a first in series that was discounted and, do some of the promos and things like that. So that was a really big thing for me. Um, and then the other thing goes back to what I was just talking about writing community. And so I have a number of really good friends and we all share each other's books. And so that was very helpful. And at this point, I would really say my newsletter is really important. And my newsletter has grown a lot over the last couple of years. And that's where I really find my my audience is. And so that's a little bit it's easier to write, like one little bit of a newsletter than for me to do all the social media posts all the time. So yeah, I would say that I have grown from promos, other authors sharing my work, and I mean my books and my newsletter.
What did you find was helpful to growing your newsletter?
Okay, so it was some of the same things really. My friends sharing, my newsletter. I have 2 no, I have 3 now, that were reader magnets, so books that I gave away for free, if they signed up for my
Okay.
newsletter.
Mhm.
And I have different ones, well, mostly because my writing has grown, and so I like writing a new one, and so it's fresh, but, they intro to different series,
Okay.
and those have been in a number of paid promos too, but then just other writers sharing them. Last year, I was in a group where everybody shared a different newsletter book each month. And so, yeah, so just kind of sharing them and sharing other authors sharing them with their own audiences and then having them in some paid promos too is really how that has grown.
Do you have any tips for finding a community? Like this is I mean, obviously it sounds like your community has played such a vital role in your success.
Hmm.
And so how did you find your community, and do you have any tips for finding other writer friends?
So
And I should
I,
clarify, not just other writer friends, because like you can there's tons of like writing groups like at libraries and stuff like that. And it's just
yeah,
a different vibe when it's like you're writing to publish. Like the goal is to put
yes.
your book out there. How do you find a writing community that's like-minded in that goal of publishing?
I actually did not know how to do that, how to make writer friends. I will tell you, I literally prayed that the Lord would give me writer friends because I didn't know anybody who was doing what I was doing. And then I would get in writer groups and they would be like writing different genres. And it's just not the same thing. For me, I
Mhm.
really wanted writer friends who were writing what I was writing. So one of my best friends, Mandy Blake, she was in a writer group and she and I are both from Alabama. So when she posted that she was from Alabama, I messaged her and we just started talking. And honestly, we've just been friends ever since. And then my other best writer friend is Tara Grace Erickson, and she was starting a multi-author series. And so she had invited Mandy, and then I had applied to it. And because Mandy knew me, I kind of got into the group. But anyway, so the three of us talk every single day. So it really just kind of happened organically. We were all writing the same things. We were all busy moms. And so I So I don't know if that really helps or not, but I will that I guess just that I prayed really that the Lord would give me writer friends. And then I spent time in those groups and places where people who were writing similarly to me were kind of hanging out. Um, so yeah, and then just challenge each other because really the way that it grew is that we were just like, hey, we just like, do you want to just talk sometimes?
Yeah.
And so it just grew from there. So just be intentional and kind of look for somebody who writes similarly to you, and then be intentional about encouraging each other and talking. So
I love that. I love the fact that you brought up the prayer thing because I think we forget that. And we're like, we gotta
mhm.
find friends. Like we forget that the
Yeah.
Lord knows what we need and can bring that to us.
Yes.
And I like the fact that you said about being intentional because I think sometimes we're like, we just wait for somebody to come to us. And if everybody just waits for somebody else to come up to them, it's never going to happen, right? Like
Yeah.
none of us are ever going to be in community because we're all shy in some way or
Yeah.
another, right? It just feels
Yes.
awkward at first, but to be willing to just put yourself out there and go for it and just and not be afraid of getting a no, just
Yeah.
being like, hey, I might as well ask because
Yes.
what's the worst that they can say? No, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, and two, like they're probably looking for writer friends too. So,
mhm,
if they might be sitting around waiting for somebody, to come
mhm.
into their life too. So, yeah, just reach out and you just never know what might come from it.
Do you have any are you part of any like writing groups?
I am not currently. I had a membership with ACFW at one point in time, but I just I just didn't do very much with it, so I
Oh,
haven't
it's
been
American
involved.
Christian Fiction Writers.
There you go.
That's what it is, I
There it
believe. It,
is.
like, came to
Yeah.
me as you were talking. Okay,
Yeah.
so the point here is you don't have to be part of a fancy membership to find writer friends. You
No,
can find
absolutely
them.
not.
Okay. I just wanted to point that out there because I think sometimes we can think it's a lot more complicated than it really is. And so,
Yes.
well, this has been really insightful and I think really encouraging too, just to hear how, I think it's helpful sometimes to just hear what somebody else is doing who has been there and maybe is a little further down the road than us, to hear what they're doing and how they're what it looks like so we can get ideas. Like obviously like my life and somebody else who's listening to this is not going to look exactly like yours because we have our own unique nuances and different kids, different situations. Um but it's helpful I think to just hear the different things that somebody's doing and maybe we can glean ideas from it. And so before we go, I just wanted to know if there's any tools or tricks or things like outside of writing that even have helped you with navigating balancing the writing and the home life. um, Maybe things uh like for me, I use Plan to Eat. It helps me with my grocery planning and shopping and all that stuff. And I would say like that helps me because it cuts down my time for all that, right? And so it gives me a little bit more time to write. Is there anything like that that you can think of that you're like, oh my gosh, you need this, you need to do this because it will give you so much more time?
So there are tons of, resources that, things like meal kits and, planners that tell you like exactly how to clean your house every week or whatever. And so I would say depending on your personality and your, family situation or whatever, doing things like that, like investing, in a meal plan that tells you what to do or, whatever, those are good resources that can just kind of help take brain space. Um, that free up brain space for you to be able to do the other things. So if you're in a position where you can take advantage of those kinds of resources, then I would absolutely say, give yourself permission to do it every once in a while or whatever.
Yeah. Have you found any tools that have helped you along the way, just maybe even from the writing side of things? Like you mentioned you used a software for
hmm
what software do you use?
So I use Vellum for formatting
Okay.
all my books. Yeah, super
Okay.
easy, super great. So
Yeah. Are there any other tools like that that you are fond of?
So some of my favorite things are the writing thesauruses. There's the emotion thesaurus and the wound thesaurus and those kinds of things. I love like resources that I can pull to help me with writing. If I write in Google Docs, which is the plainest, easiest thing to write in. But I do that because I can write on my phone or
Yep.
I can write on my computer and I can just go back and forth. So that is a huge, huge help for me. I used to only write in Pages on Mac, and then it would be on my computer and I'd be on my phone and I'd have to move stuff over. So writing on something that connected to multiple devices was super helpful.
Yeah, that's key. I agree with that, especially when you're like
Yeah.
on the go or you're at the park or things like that. It can help
Yes.
keep things consistent and in flow between the different devices really easily. That's really good.
Yes. Yep.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your tips, your suggestions, and even just your encouragement for moms to pursue the thing because their kids need to be seeing that in action, and
Mhm.
that example is a really good thing for our kids. I think we all need to hear that. So thank you for sharing that. Before we go, I would love for you to tell the listeners where we can find you, how we can best support you, if you have anything in the works coming up or what however we can support you.
Sure. So I am on Instagram and it's just at Hannah Jo Abbott. I also have a Facebook reader group, which I know we talked about. I don't do a whole lot in, but it's there and I do like to share from time to time. And it's Hannah Jo's Faithful Readers. And then what I'm currently working on is actually something that might be very interesting to your listeners. I am working on a course to help busy moms find time to write. And so
Well,
it's
there
kind of
you
some of the
go.
things, yeah. So kind of some of the same things that we've talked about, but more in depth. And it's going to have like planning sheets and just step by step, like how you can make your own plan. Because like you said, everybody's life is different, but so it's not like only how I do it, but like how you can find time in your own life to do it. So that's going to be coming soon. If you're interested in that, you can go on my website. It's hannahjoabbott.com/pages/writing course. And so if you go there, you can find a way to sign up for when it's available and when I will release more information about that. So I just hope that that will be encouraging to moms and just show that like if I'm doing this as a stay-at-home mom of 5 and homeschooling and all the things, and we have a super busy life, like you can find a way to do it too. So I just always want to encourage moms with that.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all that you have today. I look forward to when your course drops. I think it'll be a really great resource for moms.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening to today's episode of The Business of Christian Fiction. Join us back here next time as we continue to talk what it means to make an impact and an income from your writing. Bye.